Okay, awesome. All right. Firstly, thank you for agreeing to do this, Venkat. Really excited to have this conversation. Something that would be awesome just to get started with is just like tell us a little bit about your background, your role at Belcorp. Like just like get us started with telling us a little bit about that and just your journey that got you here.
First and foremost, Prukalpa, thank you for the opportunity. I'm excited to have this conversation with you today and share my experience and learnings and also have a great conversation with you. I am currently the Chief Digital Technology and Data Officer for Belcorp. I've been with Belcorp for almost close to 3 years this May. It's been an exciting journey, a lot of learnings and great to see the organization growth in the last 3 years, even though we had challenges in the last couple of years with COVID, but that was a blessing in disguise. And my job responsibility is about driving digital transformation, but it's also I'm responsible for data analytics across the organization. And prior to Belcorp, I have been with CPG, retail, and e-commerce companies in various capacities with Estee Lauder, Sephora, LVMH, Walmart Labs, Nike, AT&T, and Target, and I did my startup for a while as well.
That's awesome. And I know we've talked a lot about this, and I would love for you to like share just the big picture vision of Belcorp and how data is important to you as you think about that big picture vision that you're striving towards.
For sure. I think Belcorp started as a direct selling company way back in 1969. The whole goal was empowering women entrepreneurs. That was the core focus, and we have three brands, Ethical Label and Sizone. But my mandate coming into Belcorp was moving into more digital and direct to consumer. And thanks to COVID, when COVID happened, I think that created a whole opportunity for the technology and data professional. As you may know, we were not in digital transformation, we were in digital acceleration. And obviously, COVID created a crisis for us, especially because we are a non-essential CPG. When you look at it, it's beauty and luxury. And when we looked at during that wave, during the initial COVID, we talked about, okay, what does it going to be our future? How do we use this crisis as an opportunity? And we crafted what we call a Belcorp 2.0 vision. And what that means is we want to be fully digital business and a consumer-centric company in the next 3 to 4 years. And that was a very ambitious plan. It has 5 strategic pillars. I'll not go into each of these pillars. But the most important thing is that both from an organization perspective, the CEO and the board felt the importance of data, advanced analytics, and AI. And one of the core pillars out of the 5 strategic pillars was accelerate growth and productivity through game-changing data, advanced analytics, and AI. And I think that's a change in the history of Belcorp. When you have company strategy moving towards more data and advanced analytics, and the organization is fully bought into that. And that was an important moment, and it obviously took 3 to 4 years of setting up the strategy in terms of both from going into digital business and consumer-centric company, and also looking at the data as the pillar for, as we say, accelerate growth and productivity. So it's been last couple of years has been a great journey in terms of moving the organization, moving into more consumer centricity and creating new business model, all enabled through data. So if I have to give you the 3 months of intense, the executive committee used to meet generally once a week and once a month when we have, and then during COVID we met almost every single day, and almost probably I would say 15 to 20 hours and sometimes 6-hour sessions. And why am I saying this is the whole new strategy was powered by data in terms of looking at the consumer behavior shifts, looking at what's happening in the industry because of the COVID, looking at how the beauty industry is shaping, of the technology, the affordability of technology, accessibility of technology as such. And also looking at the overall data analytics spectrum. So this all helped us to kind of position the whole strategic pillar. So I would say even though the data analytics is a strategic pillar, the rest of all strategic pillar is actually shaped by data analytics.
I do have one question that I want to ask you. You have actually been very, very forward thinking in the stack that you've adopted. Like just tell us a little bit about the stack and like the kind of tooling that you've put in place in the fundamental stack.
I think we are moving into a modern data stack overall. Obviously, it's a combination. I would say it's a little bit of a hybrid, I would say, to be honest. We are around 98% of our workloads in cloud. We are the largest consumer of AWS. So cloud first adoption always from a beginning, right? And from a data ingestion standpoint, we have Nextla. We moved into Snowflake from a data warehouse standpoint. And then on the data lake itself, we are taking advantage of all of the Amazon services, whether it's S3, Redshift, and then there is some open source tooling as well that we look at. We use Tableau pretty significantly, and we're also looking some other visualization tool, but Tableau is the go-to tool from a visualization standpoint. And we look at the modern data stack, pretty much moving into the cloud, right? With some of them, I think we have our own cloud. So that's why I said it's a little bit of a hybrid. But what we are constantly doing is that we are looking for fit for purpose, right? What makes sense for us to move and how the journey will look like, and without disrupting the business. So something that we are moving into, and it's a work in progress, if I have to say that, yeah. But we are, I would say, a little bit more advanced in, I would say, most of the traditional enterprises, if I have to say that.
That's amazing. And tell me a little bit about that, just that cultural change, right, in the organization, like especially in an org where it's traditionally been run in a certain way, people make decisions in a certain way. That culture change is hard. And for you, as someone who 3 years ago came into this role, how did you go about driving that culture change? How did you go about designing even the data strategy and figuring out what you should pick first and prioritize versus others? Tell us a little bit about that journey.
Okay. I think there is two parts to the question. One was the culture, and second was the going about the strategy. Regarding the culture, I think, as I say, culture eats strategy for the breakfast. So we are going to talk about the strategy as the second part. So for me, the culture has also have other elements. I was the first outsider outside of Latin America hired to run, and obviously I'm in an executive role, and obviously there is a language barrier and a culture barrier initially. Obviously, I have to just give you a little bit of my background. I like to be uncomfortable, and part of me is to change my jobs every 4 to 5 years because I love to meet new people, new culture, because that keeps me grounded or also keeps me kind of uncomfortableness. So when I came on board, I think they had several things. One, understanding the organizational culture, understanding the LATAM in terms of that cultural element, and then the language barrier that I had that I need to get through. And one good thing that I actually looked at Belcorp is Belcorp values. The values was ingrained into part of the DNA of the organization. They are very welcoming from a new ideas perspective, new leadership, and new perspectives. And that was very refreshing for me, both from the CEO, board, and the rest of the organization. When we look at the cultural change as such, because it was very traditional run organization before when I came, I'm talking about technology and data. So I have to do 2 or 3 things. One, I think I did the whole reorg in terms of moving the organization to be much more modern, engineering-driven organization. Obviously, I set the goal from a vision standpoint. We want to be the best technology team in LATAM, transforming business and consumer life, right? That's the vision that I set. And obviously, there are strategic pillars within moving into the reorg. And then second part of it is also moving into more engineering-driven, creating engineering career path, whether it's software engineer, data scientist, data engineer, data analyst, and then creating all the different career paths for them, because that is critical for me, changing the organization from a technology and data analytics. The second part of the culture is about how does technology and data analytics is in an organization, right? If it is traditionally seen as a cost center, if you really look at it, right? And I wanted to make the technology have a seat in the table, and obviously looking at more of a profit center conversation and how technology can help. And obviously COVID helped me a little bit in my second year. The first year was challenging in terms of driving that. The second year, actually, as we go into the COVID situation, I think that was very obvious. The technology and data is going to be critical in making that happen. And so I have to do a series of leadership influencing model, understanding where the organization is coming from, understanding where the gap exists, both from a business understanding standpoint as well as from a cultural standpoint. Where are the leadership gap that we see within the organization? Who are the right role that needs to be put in place, as well as hiring external member, so that both the old and the new, right? The fusion of that is very critical from a standpoint. And then when it comes to that at a broader level, cultural aspect of it. And then when we look at data and analytics, one good thing before I came on, I think they're very KPI driven. They look at operational metrics really well. That was really good, that looking at those sales KPI and what happens on a day-to-day basis, on a weekly metrics was good. But what was missing was more on the strategic as well as creating new business model or new business opportunities. And that was what I was able to establish on both on a quarterly basis. How do we look at those goals, and how do we use data and analytics to kind of have those informed conversation at different organization levels? And second, also before COVID, we started looking at new business model, moving from direct selling to direct to consumer. And we want the consultant that we have around close to 1 million consultant to be more of a social seller. So there are two, I talked about the strategy before, what is happening in the industry, the beauty industry, that the beauty industry is very social in nature. The social selling models are getting more adopted in China, and the similar model is in Latam because of the cultural similarity. So we, thank God that we did launch the new business model right before the COVID happened, so we were prepared for that. And so this was also allowed from a perspective of looking at more strategic, and new business opportunities, not looking at the old way of doing things. And then second part is also about what I did in my first 2019 called Data Day. So we took an entire day where we asked different business stakeholders in a huge physical space. Now we are actually talking in Zoom, huge physical space, talking about all of the different decisions that they are making, how data is helping them, and both tactically and strategically. And that kind of came from the business stakeholder, not from technology, right? The technology teams are providing the tools, but the business stakeholders are actually sharing. That was very enriching for the cross-functional organization, because you generally look at a bigger organization, there is a siloed element to it. People look at their own problem that they're solving for. And when they see the cross-functional different aspect of whether it's supply chain, R&D, product innovation, commercial, e-commerce, retail, talking about different aspect of data and analytics and how that is powered. And obviously we had a great format for people to get attracted and visualize it. And that kind of helped the power of data per se. And then regarding the data strategy, so I'll come to that part of the second part of your question. So when we looked at in 2020 around March, as I talked about the Belcorp 2.0 strategy, and one of the strategic pillars is data, advanced analytics, and AI. So we looked at and saying, what is our North Star will look like? Obviously, when we look at data strategy, I think there is no one silver bullet, or there is no one means to solve the problem. There is different companies or different contexts that you're in, the cultural aspect of it, the vertical that you play in, all of this play, and then the workforce that you have, the employee, all of that needs to be into consideration. So there is no one single path playbook for that. So what we looked at from Belcorp standpoint is, okay, once we painted our Belcorp 2.0 vision, and then I kind of looked at to say, what is a North Star from a data analytics standpoint that I need to look at? What does business need to function? Let's say in 2024, I want data analytics being the DNA ingrained in the organization, that they're delivering value at scale across different domains. And then looking at the enablers in terms of creating both internal ecosystems, in terms of creating a data ecosystem. And then looking at the use cases that we are able to get the values across organization, this kind of creating a North Star, and then working backwards and saying, hey, how do I going to enable that, right, in terms of looking at that. So we looked at kind of a strict strategic dimensions. One is a strategic roadmap, looking at business-led AI advanced analytics data roadmap, which ties back to the Belcorp 2.0 vision, and that translates into kind of a I think we looked at both the consumer journey and also the company value chain, from brand building, innovation, supply chain, digital sales, personalization to post-purchase, and what are the different use cases that we need to look at, and how this is going to drive incremental value to the business, as well as driving consumer loyalty and retention. And then we kind of prioritize that around close to 60 use cases, I would say, across this whole value chain. And each of the use cases were actually also looked at from a strategic fit standpoint, and then from a data architecture readiness and business readiness standpoint. And then this was prioritized in kinds of waves. And then we also looked at from a milestone standpoint. So what does it mean by Q3? What we will enable by Q3, not just a roadmap activity, but actual milestone, right? So we know what we are getting from a consumer personalization standpoint, from a supply chain standpoint, from R&D and product innovation, creating the milestones. And then the whole technology piece of it, how do we make sure we have the right data platform, right architecture in place, right tools in place? So kind of looking at around the 6 dimensions. And then we crafted capabilities around that. Beyond the 60 use cases, around 170 capabilities covering the dimension from data governance, data quality, data accessibility, looking at obviously the lineage and all of that falls under within the data management, so I'm not going into that. And then including how do we actually drive the adoption, right, in terms of cultural and change management exercise, And so all of them marked under this 7 big dimensions. And then we have assigned owners, and all of this is actually published in a dashboard for everybody to see, right? Okay, where we are going, what are the use cases we're delivering, who are the domain leads, what are the key KPIs that we are going to measure, and each of the use cases has a journey, right? From a POC, and then the value realization starts from 25%, and then every version, there are 4 versions of any use cases to get to 100% realization of the value, and what must be true to make that happen, right? So those are all what thinking went in. And this is not just done by me. So even though I'm just being the face of the conversation, this is done, it takes a village to do it. So we actually had a very cross-functional team from data analytics, technology, the business domain stakeholders. So this is actually a joint exercise and kind of driving that. And also from an organization standpoint, how do we had a provocative questions, like 5 or 6 provocative questions that I had in terms of how do we drive incremental value across the organization, what is the tools and mechanism we need to provide for the executive committee to track the progress as well as make an impact if there is any change that is necessary. How do we bring the domain stakeholders? How do we create the excitement in the organization, creating the first lighthouse cases, and how the subsequent roadmap to make sure we have that the excitement, because digital transformation is a very complex journey, right? There will be failures, and how do we make sure culturally we embrace the failure, what I call the psychological safety. And that has been the hard part, Prukalpa, if I have to say it, because when I say culture is very loaded term, culture in terms of organization culture, culture in terms of the region that I am operating in. People don't generally tend to speak up, no? And they think green is a good mindset, so I have to change. Red is a good mindset. It's okay to fail, but make sure that you're bringing those failures early so that we are able to learn. And so it's a very, I would say, an onion with the different layers that I have to peel without me crying about going about that. So it was when I look back, on the last couple of years, it's been an interesting journey. I think it's also the excitement.
Got it. That's amazing. I mean, having seen also a lot of the, like I think I've been lucky to see some of this in action as well. And I actually think that you can actually have like a masterclass on driving data strategy, cultural change, enablement. Like I think the kind of work that you've been able to do, and like just seeing the depth and the quality at so many levels. I mean, it's such a large organization, so many things. I feel like we can do. Definitely there should be a masterclass by you at some point on that topic for chief data officers. On that note, one of the things you talked about was, data management, governance, democratization. Tell us a little bit about that. Where did this even start from? What's the vision? What were the problems you were looking to solve here?
Okay, there is 2 parts before and after that Belcorp 2.0. When I came on board, I think we all talk about data-driven decision making or data-driven organization. And then we say, hey, where we are in the data-driven? No? When we say data-driven, looks very fluffy. So okay, what does it mean? How do we measure, right? So, and one of the things that the board also wanted to know, hey, tell us that. So we kind of looked at that time an assessment of the internal organization from 5 different aspect of it, all the way from executive sponsorship, from data management, looking at data governance, looking at the value realization, and kind of calibrating ourselves in those, each of them. It's a very exhaustive study. I will not go into the details of each of those pillars. And then we marked ourselves around, I would say, 2.5 out of the 5 score, okay? If let's say Google is at 4.5, we are at 2.5, long way to go, 2019. And then for each one of that, we had a score and where we need to look at. And then we kind of created specific, each of those pillars, what are the necessary things that we need to do. What we created tracks for each one of them that includes data management, data governance, looking at the data platform architecture, data quality, and so on and so forth. And then looked at a roadmap in achieving all of that in a milestone way, because there is a lot to be done. And then that started even before the Belcorp 2.0 in kind of laying out the foundation, right? And then the data governance office was established at that point in time. I think I kind of have a little bit of a, when the governance word comes in, I think people always have a negative connotation, because governance is always looked at very bureaucratic process. It's there is no value and stuff like that. So I want to make a little bit the data governance much more lightweight, meaning it's easier for people to adopt, right? I always give an example to my team members is there is no training manual for Facebook or WhatsApp or Google search, right? And when we look at a corporate enterprise, we talk about training manual, we are shoving it in the throat, and that becomes very hard for people to adopt. So we need to look at the change management more about how organically we look at, right, in terms of what are the business problems that they're trying to solve for. What is a friction that they have in their way to solve for that, right? And what do we need the ideal state to look like, and how do we get there, in terms of looking at that much more culturally and organically. So we're able to provide the right resources, tools, and mechanism to get there, right? And I said, when I say data governance, we looked at the overall vision is how do we manage data as a strategic asset so that turns out into a competitive advantage for Belcorp. No, that's the vision for data governance office. And then it comprises of three elements. Obviously, the data governance activities that needs to happen in terms of the operating model, the roles, responsibility, the policies, how often we meet, who the stakeholders are, the business stewards, and so on and so forth. And second one is around all the data management capability, understanding the critical data, the critical domain data around that, the discoverability of data. All of that falls under the data management aspect of it. And the third one is around looking at the data quality. Right? There are three things when the business looks at, hey, can I get access to the data, right? Can I trust the data so that can make an informed decision? Can I make those decisions faster and quicker, right? That's going to be the three things that they kind of look at. When you talk about data democratization, I feel like it's an ongoing process. It's not a destination. It's a journey, right? The data things are constantly changing. We are getting new sources of data. New business models are coming in, and the organization is an evolving organism, right? An organization is an evolving organism, and that means the data is also changing with that. So that means I see data democratization an ongoing process, enabling everyone in the organization to be comfortable working with the data. That's number one, right? And second, able to speak confidently data-related question. That is whether data-related question or business-related questions. And the third, by doing this so that they're able to make data-informed decisions, right? I would rather call, instead of being a data-driven organization, decision-driven organization, right? Because end of the day, what it matters is the decision, right? How am I making quality decisions? Am I making faster decisions? Can I learn from the decision so that I'm able to pivot quickly, whether it's a strategic decision that I need to make or it's a new business model, right? That's how I see that from a data democratization standpoint. I think I want to give an analogy back to the world is flat, right? When I think Thomas Friedman says the same thing from a data democratization standpoint, right? Everybody have equal access to the data, no matter where they are within the organization hierarchy.
So tell us a little bit about the journey to find the right tooling and the platform and the solution to sort of enable that broader vision that you had when you thought about data governance and management.
Well, that's a very interesting question. I think as we are looking through the journey, I think that the data is exploding across the enterprise, right? Because of the strategy that we are embarking on. And one of the key challenges where we looked at was around the data discoverability aspect of it. When an organization is there and moving at a different, tremendous pace, and also we are getting new employees coming into the organization, and so there is no one single view of what's happening in the organization per se, right? And so the data discoverability becomes a very critical aspect of it. The second aspect was around the data quality, the trusting data, which has become critical because it's a very subjective conversation that you always in a meeting with a business. I see data quality issues, and then my data analytics team, everything looks fine, business is always complaining. So we need to have very objective conversations around the data quality so that we understand that what the business is speaking versus the data analytics speaking around and the data quality, because the trust is a very critical aspect of it. And the third one is about how do we do the value realization of the data, and in terms of improving the efficiency of all the data projects that we have, because majority of the time is spent in from a data discovery, data prep, and I would say 30 to 40% are much higher. And so we wanted to reduce that in terms of efficiencies of the and productivity of the project per se, right? And then we started looking at open source tools. It was actually looking at Lyft, Uber, LinkedIn, and even Apache open source. And then we are almost about to, let's go up with open source, let's do an MVP, how we see, and then we see how the adoption goes. Maybe that's what we need to look at. Obviously, the open source tools are great, but I think what they don't have is a full product view, because it's supposed to be something that the community will build on top of that. So the UI or the collaboration needs that I wanted was not there. It was predominantly focused more on the data and engineering team, right, in terms of how that was structured in. And then I think, I believe I reached out to you or you reached out to me or somehow that happened. I think the timing was like perfect. I would not, impeccably perfect. And then when you reached out to me and I said, hey, we did look at the commercial tool, a couple of them, we looked at it and saying, hey, maybe we should look at open source. There was like discussion going on. And then I think once I talked to you and I think was intrigued, I think what you were looking at is completely not just looking from a data governance and data catalog, but more about this data ops, right? I think if you remember that you wanted to make how GitHub is for developers, similar for data and the entire organization. I remember that tagline when you say that, and I say that intrigued me. I think they're trying to solve the problem from a cross-functional standpoint. I think that is important because this is important when we talk about data democratization. And then we engaged with your team. And then I think, and not only that data analytics team was involved, we had the business stakeholder, what we call the data rockstar, were part of it, because end of the day, we want the business stakeholder be bought into the tool, whatever that we are actually going to roll out to the entire organization. So we had good feedback throughout that, and I'm glad that we made the decision to go with Atlan, and obviously with your leadership, your team on the ground, helping us to make sure that the POC is successful, clearly defining the POC success criteria. And I'm sure that you keep hearing that, and sometimes this is a very a discussion in enterprise about ROI always comes into picture, because it's a very difficult conversation with the financial stuff, as well as how do we invest for the future, right? It's the fine balance, right? So making sure that we have the investment on the tool from an ROI standpoint, but it's also something that we're investing for the future as a competitive advantage. Looking at all of that, landing on Atlan was a very important decision for us, and I think it helped us in the last year or so.
That's awesome. Tell us a little bit about this build versus buy, because I think it's a constant actually struggle as a data leader, right? Yeah. So as you were thinking about the build versus buy, how did you think about that?
Okay, I have a bigger theory on build versus buy. I will just try to do a smaller one. I think, I think it comes from different perspective. An engineering mindset, they wanted to feel, hey, I wanted to build. No, that is one thing that the people will always see. And then some people always say, I wanted to control my destiny. But when you look at overarchingly, I think we have to look at from a business and what we are trying to solve for, right? What is the business problem at hand? And what are we trying to solve for? And then we need to have a fit for purpose, right? In terms of what is that the problem area, the solution that we are looking for. And with that being said, I look at it in three. When there is tools that is mature in the industry, and the things that is not going to drive me or Belcorp a differentiating factor or a competitive advantage, there is no point in building things for that, right? Because if my process is unique or if my business model is unique, then I need that if none of the solution exists in the market, then obviously then I would rather want to go and buy the solution. That cuts across all kinds of decision, not just for this particular one. So we had this kind of a framework. And when we looked at it, obviously, initially I was pushing the organization to be honest on the open source, okay? I was just little intrigued myself and saying, hey, this is really, I think there is a momentum building on that. Now then, when obviously this is why the devil is in the details, you know, when we go and unpack things and we look at, even though the community is building, we wanted some, I would say, a well-rounded tool. So that cater to all the needs, you know, from whether it's the business stakeholders, whether it's data and technology folks, and that means they're able to collaborate in a tool, and the ease of adoption will be much easier. The UI becomes very critical aspect of it. And then there are things that we don't need to reinvent the wheel, right? If I get an open source, I'm going to fork the code. At the moment I fork the code, even though I may use the word people may not like, it becomes proprietary. It is, because I'm going to just have my own version of that, right? And that then becomes hard to maintain. Then something that I want my data and engineering team not focus on that, but focus on higher order value to the business, right? And so I wanted to go to somebody who has already been there, done that. And so when you and your team showed me, I said, hey, I think the problem solved, something that I don't need to go and build. Rather, I will buy it, because you guys have an amazing product, checked all the boxes in terms of the holistic nature of the tool, where you're actually pushing. I think I know at that time data ops was a little early point in time, and congratulations for being recognized as one of the top 5 in IDC. And so looking at that from a hindsight standpoint, that was great to see that making a buy decision was the right thing. And then also looking at your roadmap and where we are building from a number of connections and partnership and improving the product roadmap, being and willing to look at working with your customers were critical for us. So when you look at holistically buy versus build, I think it's important to see where you're focused as an organization, what is a driver that is going to differentiate a competitive advantage, and then the solution doesn't exist in the market. Does the solution cater to all the different needs from a cross-functional standpoint, different roles and personas? And third, is it something that you are going to invest in maintaining the platform, right? So something that I do not want my team to do that. I want the team to help the business. So looking at all of that and then looking at the product fit, I think that's why I say from a buy versus build perspective.
That makes a ton of sense. And out of curiosity, like if you could take us back to that time, were there one or two things that stood out about Atlan that made you pick Atlan?
Yeah, I think the collaboration nature of the platform, right, which I really loved it. I think how different people can actually collaborate. Second, the UI was incredibly simple and easy from a standpoint, because as I said, there is no training manual for WhatsApp and Facebook, because one of the key challenges working with thousands of enterprise software that I always see that I'm a consumer, even if I come to an office, no? So why do you treat me so different to have this cognitive overload of training on an enterprise software? Because enterprise software has always been very clunky, hard to use. When you look at the consumer product, it's so easy to use. Why there is a shift? It should be the same, right? I'm the same guy in an office and outside. So it's something that needs to be looked at. And when I look at your software, I do, Bill, I think you have that kind of a mindset. And I think when I looked at it, it's a collaboration tool, ease of use from a UI standpoint, having the out-of-the-box connected to all the data sources that we have. More than that, I think it's also the team around it. No, see, I can have the greatest of the product that I can work. If the team on the ground is not helping from a success standpoint, it's going to be very difficult. So I think the team is invested in the success of it. So that I really liked it. And then if I have to look at the fourth dimension is also pushing the boundary from a data ops standpoint. I think you guys are very community driven, pushing kind of a paradigm shift in how things have to be looked at. And that is essential for me from an innovation and leadership standpoint, right? Because not only what the product is great today, how is it going to evolve in the next 2 years is critical. And that means the leadership and the innovation of the product roadmap is critical from a standpoint. You asked me 3, I gave you 4. Okay.
No, that means a lot. Thank you so much. And I think a lot of why we can do what we do is because of partners and champions like you who also push us to and give us problems that are exciting enough for us to be able to go in and hopefully build and experiment and solve some of these things. Would love to go a little bit into the journey. It's been over a year. What has the journey been like for Belcorp with Atlan? How did the implementation strategy evolve over time?
I think that's a great question. I think first and foremost, thank to your team. I would actually probably call the name as well. Ashwin being part of very close to the team was very good. So initially, and I think we've overcame that, kind of making sure the right team in the mix. And also laying out kind of what the roadmap will look like in terms of, we talked about, hey, let's take one business unit, roll that out, understand what works, what doesn't work, learn from that, and then kind of build that. I know I put a little aggressive goal to my team because I always believe in the OKR strategy of doing a little bit of a stretch. So when the roadmap looked very aggressive, that was on purpose. If I look back in hindsight, I could have been a little bit be more pragmatic. So being me, that's one of my personal characteristics, so pushing a little bit. So that was a little aggressive in terms of rolling it out, because it's not just rolling the tool, it's about the business users. I think starting with asking the key question, what the business is trying to solve for, right? I think you had laid out a very clear kind of looking at, hey, discoverability of asserts, looking at enriching the data, and then the consumption of the data, and then actually seeing the value of the data. I think that was one of the, if I remember well, the success of adoption that you guys have rolled out. And then working closely with your team in terms of which business stakeholder, because we also wanted to identify the business team, it would be more of a champion. So we picked one of the business unit, initially rolled out, learned some challenges in terms of how they see it. And I think we also did an interview, an assessment after the initial rollout to understand what worked and what did not work, and how are they using the tool, what questions are they asking for, what is the cadence and frequency. And I think after that, I remember you stepping in along with Mathura, kind of doing an interview to see, hey, where we need to look at, what are the challenges, building that persona journey to make sure and to their needs, I think was very critical, right? Because everybody is different. I think we have to use different stroke for different people. And so that kind of helped what we say from an adoption standpoint, having the persona. And then I think now we are in a much more of a steady state. Now we are picked up the critical business area that we want to roll out, and we have a roadmap in terms of moving forward from that standpoint. One of the things we did is name the project as Alexandria. I love to have project names. Alexandria was one of the greatest libraries, so data catalog and Alexandria kind of worked well. So I think it also kind of helped from a marketing standpoint internally.
No, I love that. I love Alexandria, and I love in some ways, also the energy and the excitement, because with a large organization, in some ways, that is important, right? Like bringing people together with you, just because there's so many things happening in general inside the org. So I love what you've done with like the Alexandria videos. And what surprised you the most about Atlan in the last year?
I think beyond the product is, I think, the team commitment on the ground. I think checking back constantly what's going on, having the daily, weekly cadence. I think you and I checking in on a constant basis how things are, hey, what challenges on the table are, and talking about that openly, right? That's the most important thing. And being invested in the success of Belcorp is critical for me, right? I see this is a partner-partners relationship more than a client-vendor relationship, which I don't ever say that in my conversation with any of my partners. So I think that was most important for me. Obviously, we picked the product because we understand the product is great and able to install easily, configure and all of that. I think that's given, no? That's why we chose you, right? There is no issue there. I think but what surprised me both is the commitment from you and your team invested in the success of Belcorp. I think that's, for me, I would say the higher order bit, in terms of looking at what surprised me, because I work with several vendors and I know the sales cycle and when it comes to implementation, how they react. But I think you guys are genuinely interested in investing the success of an organization. You're genuinely interested in moving the data ops movement. I think you're trying to disrupt the industry and think differently. I think that is most important. I hope you guys keep that, as you scale. I think that is the essence core of Atlan, if I have to say. So keep that as you scale.
That means a lot to us, and we're hearing more of that as well. On that note, actually, if there's we'd love to actually play a small snippet of this for our team. If there's like a message you could give to the entire Atlan team, what would you tell them? What would you share with them?
I think they are working in an organization which is amazing, right? First. Second, they have an amazing leader, you and your co-founder. I think that starts with the leadership. And I think the third, kind of pushing the data ops movement, I think you guys are in a very sweet spot, right? And I think that means when I look at me as an employee that I wanted to work in an organization, I want to look at the leadership. I wanted to be fully aligned on the company vision. That's what's going. I want to be part of something bigger, not just doing a product, but something disrupting the industry, which you guys are doing so. And then the fourth is a cultural aspect of it. What I see from outside is what I will tell you, how your teams are engaged in LinkedIn, in social media, the community. I get emails all the time, and how you guys are participating and keeping the momentum live. I think that for me is for me, any employee is a kid in the candy store. I would say that all these four, I think, would say whoever is working in Atlan and making an impact, I think have a great career ahead.
Thank you. How has Atlan helped you and the team in the last year?
I think, as I said, the discoverability ability of the data, and obviously we're also looking at some data lineage aspect of it as we build different business domain, and also from the trust of earning the trust from a data quality standpoint, and then the collaboration that we are trying to look at. So I think we are right now in 3 or 4 domains, if I recollect clearly. So I think that has helped in terms of one, the business is saying the power of what it is. In fact, even I shared that to the executive committee, and wow, this is amazing. I said it's a Google-like search, just to make it analogy very easy for them, right? Because Google has become a synonymous to search, and I hope Atlan becomes that for the data ops, and then we say Atlan rather than not say data ops. I think that'll be fantastic to see that in the next few years. I think that kind of helped the momentum. in terms of bringing the right tools to the organization with the right thought partner, and we have seen the success. And obviously, there is a long way to go. As I said, the data democratization is a process in making. It's a work in progress, and we need to continue to react to all the challenges of the business, the data ecosystem changing, the new employee coming in. And so it's a constant process. How do we keep the momentum live, and as well as what's happening in the industry with all the things around metadata lake, and all the buzzwords that's coming in? How do we realize from the buzz to the reality? So that's going to be the key aspect of it. See, be very excited about the future, but be more pragmatic about the implementation, right? That's the key, right? Because it's important to realize the potential, but at the same time not carried about by the hype, and then making sure that we are bringing that to the reality from a pragmatic standpoint is the key. And I believe that you guys are doing. So for us, it's also a journey that as we go through this journey, I think looking forward to your partnership and your team.
We actually have like a t-shirt that we call Just Atlan It. So hopefully someday when you say just Google it and there'll be a Just Atlan It someday. Would love to get a quick sense around just what is the future like that you have envisioned for Atlan as you think about the data strategy in the next couple of years?
There is two folds. One, I think we are bringing the Atlan as part of the Data Academy in terms of that overarching things that we want to look at. And I wanted to call out Lizeth here. It's been an amazing journey with her in the last year and a half. Now we are moving into what we call the Belcorp Data Academy Plus. I'm very proud of the Data Academy and what we have accomplished of training the entire organization. See, part of the data democratization is also educating the organization, upskilling, reskilling the organization is essential. That is how the cultural aspect of it will move forward from a standpoint. So I've seen a tremendous traction in terms of Data Academy, and people are demanding more. And obviously, we have learned some good things. Obviously, in terms of adoption rate, in terms of ROI, in terms of every metrics, I think we have blown away the numbers in Data Academy, so which was good. And so we are branding ourselves Data Academy Plus. I want to be the Netflix of Data Academy. Okay, let me pause and say why that is. We want to personalize, relevant, and engaging content. Okay, so that's why it's called the Netflix of Data Academy, because what we have learned is that I think the courses are good because we partnered with LinkedIn and Udacity, but it also takes a lot of time. So we want to go to more micro formats and micro learnings, and that is something that we are going to do this year. And the reason I say that is because the Atlan becomes part of that stuff, not just Atlan, the whole data democratization, data ops aspect of it, because that is critical from a standpoint. That is something that we are actually focusing on right now. And the second one is, I think, what we have to continue to master the fundamentals because the things are changing. We are bringing in new tools, working with different partners. And so for me, it's about data in real time access is critical. The data quality is something that we are tremendously focusing on this year. So there'll be a lot of work with your team on Atlan perspective. And something around the lineage is also something that we are looking at. So the data quality, and then the overall looking at the data democratization under the Data Academy where Atlan will fit is going to be, and then the rolling out Atlan for the rest of the other business domains. And then one of the key things is the cross-functional, tapping into the cross-functional. Now people are not looking at their own data. Now they are able to look at other data that's within the organization. That's going to unleash some more creativity and opportunity for the business in terms of looking at, hey, how do I look at that more strategically? How do I tap into the data in terms of looking at new products or new services? This is something that I'm looking forward to. And then there are several other aspects that we are continuing to work on: the data management, rebranding ourselves from a data governance in this year, and be very focused on in terms of how do we engage different business stakeholders, and also looking at several events around AI Festival 2.0. This year, and hopefully you can come and speak on that. So can you continue to drive that, because the organization excitement depends on what's happening outside, right? Not only the internal aspect of it. So something that we'll continue to do. So we'll be partnering with you from a roadmap standpoint.
Yeah, it's awesome. I have two last questions. I know we're far over time. How would you rate your experience with Atlan on a scale of 1 to 10?
The 1 being the lowest and 10 being the highest. No, just kidding. No, just kidding. Okay. I would say around 8.5, what I've seen, for the reasons I've articulated before, in terms of all the things. Obviously, every organization has a room for improvement in terms of how they think. I think the organization that think that they need to continue to improve are the organizations that are going to be successful, right? Because we always know about the innovator's dilemma, and I see that in you and your team. And I'm sure that you guys are continue to improve and break boundaries and also create new things. So I would say overall experience is 8.5.
What would take us to a 10? What is your feedback for us?
Wow, I know I should have preempted the conversation there. I never give anyone to 10. If you remember when I said the one scale of 1 to 5, Google being at 4.5, nobody is perfect, no? So I would say maybe 9.5, no? What it take to 9.5, I can only give my perspective, Prukalpa, not knowing the other things, because you are running an organization, you are running a product company, you have a vision, and so on and so forth. No, for me, my own perspective, I think is continue to innovate. No, I think the biggest challenges in any organization is scaling. And when you scale, how do you keep the culture intact? How do you keep the vision intact? Obviously, be flexible on the details because you're going to change based on what the industry is telling you. But keeping that momentum going is going to be critical. And also looking at the lessons learned from all the different verticals that we have worked with, from a different geographic standpoint, different cultural standpoint, and different vertical, and saying, hey, what do we see commonality in terms of whenever we roll out this? How do we make sure that we reduce a barrier there or friction that may exist? And so that becomes easier part of it. And then second one is continue to improve on the two product and experiences. You know? What I always say is that we want our employees to love the product, you know? And when they do that, I think there is wonders that happens because people will go above and beyond to do different things, you know? We see that when people love iPhone and what that comes out of it, and similarly, we want people to love Atlan. I want that. When I say 9.5, when people love Atlan, my job is done. No, I'm done.
Yeah. No, I think we actually have now we have this internal thing that we've created this year that we call the user wall of love. And it's actually away from typically in the ecosystem, people talk about it's about the buyers and the champions and the spokes. And we very specifically actually have we've created a company level goal. It's one of our top 5 goals for the year, and it's called the user wall of love. And the intent is how do you create more and more of stories where or create life experiences, right, for the user, where at the end of the day, if the user at the end of the day loves the product, it's adding value to their lives every day, then and so that's the starting point. I think there are elements of hopefully building into the product and things like that over time. But I fully agree with you, and thank you for that feedback.
It becomes an extension of them. No, if it becomes an extension of them, I think it makes it easier for them to say, hey, I see the value. There is no difference between them and the tool. They're there. It's part of them. Yeah.
Absolutely. Is there any advice you would give to any other data leader that's evaluating Atlan?
I hate the word advice. I will say my suggestion. So, see, we are all going, when you look at the data leader, we are in a very tough situation, I would say, because the amount of demands that we get on a day-to-day basis, because the growth that every organization needs post-COVID, as I said, and data analytics is such a huge aspect of enabling the organization from a growth standpoint. And that means that we have to make sure that we are very inclusive in all the things that we look at. And I think what we talked about, I think I go back to the first question, the cultural aspect also is very critical. Every organization is different. And the good thing is that I think compared to 5 years before, I think we have technology advancement, things that used to, for example, the build that we talked about, I think those are all coming to be more of a product that we can go and buy, right? I will not go into the modern data stack and the conversation and all of that. Okay, so, but when we really look at it, I think there are things that we think that we need to build. I think it has become a more, I would say, commodity from a standpoint. And nothing offense to the product team, but what I'm saying is a commodity from us, from an enterprise standpoint. Because for you, that's a competitive advantage. For us, it's basically, okay, this is something that I'm not going to build, I'm going to buy. And looking at that, I would say I think we are in a very good stage in terms of investing in startups. That is important. Trusting the startups, because when I look at bigger organizations, there is always a difficult friction element investing in a startup. When I look at the data analytics startup, and I've spoken to so many founders, and I see the passion, energy, the team, and I think that ecosystem needs more love, no, from data leaders like us or like me in terms of working with them because they are going to create amazing products. And obviously, the last point is about being humble and being learning because the world is changing every single day. So being open to the ecosystem and adopting that and being inclusive is going to be a very, very critical part. And the fourth, I think the difficult challenge is, I think we're talking about the great resignation. How do we retain the talent, coach the talent, and create an amazing opportunity for them is going to be one of the things that keeps me at night is about retaining the talent, coaching the talent, and hiring the talent, because without that, we're not going to do anything, right? So, and that is going to be how we as a leader that is going to do that is going to be critical. So more of a suggestion than a conversation rather than an advice, I would say.
uh, awesome. I will stop asking questions like I promised. I know we've taken more of your time than we'd budgeted, Venkat. Is there anything else you would like to share generally?
No, thank you for this opportunity. Amazing set of questions. I really always enjoy talking to you and looking forward to an amazing partnership of 2022 and beyond. And I think we are in a golden age of computing and data analytics. And hopefully get to meet you in person. It's been a very challenging couple of years doing Zoom calls. So I think human beings are in-person communication is the most critical aspect of it. So I would love to meet you and your team sometime this year in person.